Hi and welcome to the video. I'm Damon, this is Dame Over, and today we're in Apex Legends and I've put together a quick guide for the best settings you can have on console. So there's a lot to get through, let's jump straight to it, but remember guys, if you have a good time, hit that like button, or if you find this video useful as well, and if you want to keep up to date with more content, hit the subscribe button as well. And I've decided to go from the least important to the most important, and today we're going to start with audio. So lots of this is default, so I'm going to go over it briefly if it's the default setting, and only talk about it in more detail if it's not the default setting. So we've got the master volume, default 100, sound effects, default again, 95%, and I've left the dialogue as well. These three are exactly the same. The music volume I've turned all the way down because I want to put my own music in videos and not have it clashing. So the lobby music, however, there is this nice option that you can leave all the way up. So it also affects the main screen, the main menu, and when you're in the lobby, the music starts playing, which is amazing as well. So when you're actually in the game, the in-game music will turn off after you've dropped in. Again, default for subtitles and converting the incoming voice to chat text. I almost couldn't say that. So those two are off. They're not really necessary, I don't think. And with the dialogue volume up 100%, it's easy to understand what the characters are saying. So let's nip over to the videos. The brightness is exactly the same as the default. Again, I've left it exactly as it was when the game loaded and haven't changed it at all. That's what all of that means. So here is what it looks like for me, in case you were wondering. It's dead center, that little bar there. Field of view is something that I have changed and I've been playing around with it. I might even increase it a bit more. So it basically widens, yeah, as you know, widens your field of view. So it gives you a bit of a fisheye, so you can see a little bit more to the peripheries. It is very useful in a game like this where you're trying to catch movements of people off in the distance so you can work out what to do. The default setting was okay, it was absolutely fine, but after having increased it, I'm having a much better time actually picking people out and seeing things that are far away. Colorblind mode, I don't need to have it on, but it's great to have that in the game if you do need it. And you've got 3 different types of color blindness that you can swap to. So let's nip over to the gameplay one. So default with the interact prompt style. This is basically the amount of information that pops up on the screen in a little window when you're aiming at some loot. I've left it on the default because at the moment I don't quite understand all of the weapons, what they do, what ammo they go with, etc, etc. So it's good to have that extra bit of information. Button hints I've left on. This is something that I might change in the future. So when you're running up to a door and you're going to open it, it will remind you that it's the X button that does that. I'm talking about Xbox One controls. It's square on PS4. Or if you're going to ping something, it will remind you to press the right bumper or R1 if you're on PlayStation. The crosshair damage feedback is something that has changed, so I've gone with the X, which is the hit marker with the shield icon, so you can tell if you're shooting someone, when you're hitting them, sorry, if you're knocking off their shield or you're taking off their actual health. You can have no indicator on. I don't think that's a good idea because you won't know how much damage you're doing, and that will affect how you then continue with the fight. Having just the crosshair, again, better than not having it, but I think it's a much better idea to know if you're knocking off their shield or their actual health. More information is key to a first-person shooter, and especially in a battle royale as well. So damage numbers I've got on floating. It shows 1 number for each damage event. So it's useful for shotguns and when you're just laying down fire anyway, so you know whether you're going to have to close range to make sure your weapon is more effective. You can choose to have it off, which I don't think is a good idea. You can choose to have a combined number. So I don't know. I don't want to be worrying about all of that. I want to know how much damage each hit is doing. And you can have both on the screen as well, which I think would be even more confusing. So you'd get an overall number for the total of damage you've done in that fight, plus ones that are there per hit. I just think that's too much information to have on the screen at one time, and it's a bit unnecessary. So floating is the way to go. Ping opacity is default, so you hit the right bumper or R1 and it will ping a location, so that means you can see it very clearly. Helps with your teammates as well. Obituaries, it's essentially a kill feed, so you can see who's being killed by what, and you can work out where that is if you can hear the sounds of it or whatever. Much better to have this information than not to have it, so you know how to play and you can work out what weapons the other teams are using. Something that is incredibly useful considering that there are some legendary weapons that are very, very powerful in this game. So incoming damage feedback, I've left it on the default, which is 3D. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about some of the defaults, but this is important. So you can choose to have it on 2D, which I don't think is enough information in a game that has lots of different levels on it, because players are going to be above you and below you a lot of the time. So knowing exactly where they are and where you're taking damage from is super important. You can have both, but again, I think that would be too confusing having 2 arrows on the screen at the same time. So I'm leaving it on 3D. Streamer mode is something that I don't need at the moment. I probably will be streaming this game at some point in the future, so I've left it off at the moment, so it just basically stops you from being stream sniped. People won't come and deliberately try and find you and try and kill you just so they can get on your stream. Usage sharing, it's basically the data that gets sent to EA so they can help improve the game and update it and stuff like that. So I've left this on. More information going to the developers is always a good idea so they can help improve the game. Accessibility, I don't require any of this, but there are lots of options you can have. Well, you can have lots of stuff put in basically to help you if you need it. If you're visually impaired, audioly impaired, I don't know what it is. If you can't hear as well as you might be able to, and again, there's another incoming voice to chat text, which I think would take up too much space on the screen if it's not entirely necessary for you to have it. And now onto the super important stuff. We'll head over and look at the controller layout. So I'm going to take you first to the button layout. I've chosen button puncher, so that swaps the crouch and melee buttons around. So I crouch with the right stick and I melee with B, so that'll be circle on PlayStation. So this is something I do on all first-person shooters, so I can use a slide mechanic or the crouch mechanic and keep aiming at the same time without taking my thumb off the stick. So the default one is the other way around, so crouch is B and melee is the right stick. That is a classic controller layout. All of these controls, by the way, are really good. They make a lot of sense, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I've got no complaints about the controls, but it's just my personal preference to swap those two buttons around. You can have bumper jumper, which is something that was brought in, I think, in the Halo 3 days. So if you want to use LB to jump and your tactical ability gets swapped to A instead. There is Evolved, which is a cross between bumper jumper and button puncher. So you can still see there that jump is LB, melee is B, and crouch is right stick, and tactical ability again is A. Grenadier, which changes how you use your throwables. So most first-person shooters will have grenades, throwables, and stuff like that on RB, but I've chosen to keep it as the default with button puncher. So you have to use the D-pad to select it, and then the right trigger, to throw it. But again, it's a bit of a habit to get out of. If you much prefer to have it on the right button, there is an option there for you. And then there is Ninja, which swaps around some other controls as well, as you can see there. So it takes jump and crouch up onto the bumpers, I guess, so you can have the two first fingers of each hand available at all times to aim down sight, jump, crouch, and attack. So, like I said, button puncher works really well for me. I'd recommend trying it, especially in this game, because the slide mechanic is super, super important and is very, very useful in gunfights and for traversing the map. I just use the word traversing without meaning to in a real-life sentence. So the stick layout, you can change what the right and left sticks do, and you can also change, you can have southpaw, which basically swaps them around. Legacy, which is what I got confused about just then, you can split what each of them does between them. So you can move and look with both sticks at the same time. It's very confusing. So I'm staying with the default, which is looking with the right stick, moving with the left stick, as I'm sure 99% of you guys are used to doing. So the interact and reload buttons, it's tap to use on both of those. That's what I've gone for. That's the default setting. You can have a hold to use for either or. So hold to use stuff if you're going up to a doorway, you hold X to open it, and you can still tap to reload, or you can swap those two around, which means you hold to reload. I think holding a button for any longer than you need to, especially for a reload, is a bit unnecessary, and you'll be wasting your energies watching that happen instead of actually concentrating on a gunfight, which is what this game is about at the end of the day. So the crouch button, I've got that as toggle. You can choose to hold it down, but toggle means that you just have to click it in and you can keep aiming and keep the accuracy as much as possible. Aim button, again, this is a little bit different. You hold this one down, so that is as per most first-person shooters. I'm trying to think of one that I've ever played that doesn't have it as hold as the default. So if you would like to toggle it, that's totally up to you, personal preference, but it's too much of a habit for me to get out of to not hold the button down, so I'm going to leave it as it is. Sensitivity, I've upped 1 from the default here. I've gone to high on both of them. I am still playing around with it. I might put them up a little bit more. You can adjust your sensitivity, your view rotating, and your ADS sensitivity as well separately, which is a nice little thing to have. So if you prefer to be able to look when you're holding your gun at the hip a lot more quickly than you are when you're aiming down the sight, you can choose to have those options. It goes all the way up to number 8, which is insane. So if I was you, I'd play around with it a little bit. High is currently where it works for me, so I'm going to leave it as it is, and I'll play around with it again in the future. But at the moment, this is what I've been getting on with very well. The response curve, this basically means that your sticks are going to respond in the way that you expect. If you have, I think there's The only one that's really worth going for if you are like a pro gamer or you really like to adjust your own controls, if you do have an Xbox Elite wireless controller with customized stick sensitivity, you can choose to use all of that. All of these other ones are a bit too ambiguous for me, to be perfectly honest. I feel like getting used to how the sticks work, which seems to make sense. It's all fluid and there's no complaints from me, to be perfectly honest. And controls are something that I tend to pay a lot of attention to, especially early on in a game. If they don't make sense, I do try and change them as soon as possible. And the classic feel is exactly as it should be, I believe. So that's what I've left it on. The look dead zone I've got on none. You can actually have it on small as the default. There is a large setting as well. It means that you have to turn the stick a certain amount of degrees before it reacts. I'm not a big fan of that because it means if I'm trying to move in very small increments, then adjust my aim really finely, it won't actually react to it very quickly. I want to be able to move and look instantly, especially in a game like this where you have to react as quickly as possible in lots of situations. So I have taken it down to none. And the movement dead zone, there's only these two options here. So I've gone for small on here to sort of have the similar effect to the look dead zone. So make sure that my sticks react as fast as possible. Inverted look is off as default and vibration is on. And that's it, guys. Those are the best settings that I can find in Apex Legends. They really work for me, so make sure you try them out. Again, it is about trial and error. So make sure you're playing with the controls wherever you can to make sure you find what works for you exactly. But I think this is a very good place to start for most people. So here's a quick thank you to my Dame Operatives, those of you guys that are helping to support the channel through Patreon. It's because of you guys that this channel can exist, and hopefully in the near future I can start doing this full time with a bit more support. So there'll be a link in the description and the pinned comment to take you to the Patreon page where if you'd like to, you can help support the channel from as little as $1 a month. So if you had a good time, make sure you've hit that like button. If you're new around here and you want to keep up to date with even more Apex Legends content, because there's going to be loads coming out, hit the subscribe button too. Don't forget the bell button so you don't miss out on any future posts. And as always, share this video wherever you like. And until next time, that's Dame over. Peace.